all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So let's sit.
Oh, sorry, go. Yep.
So let's take a few minutes to sit. And in your own way, after assuming your very best meditation posture, relax, release. Bring your mind home. Rest in stable, focused, present awareness. And gradually turn your mind within and rest in the nature of mind, free from any contrivance or manipulation. Rest in natural great peace.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie. It sounds like you've got a little something going on in your throat.
I do. I'm sure I was talking too much today.
All right, well, we hope that you're feeling okay. It's not a sign of anything other than just doing too much practice or something.
It's wonderful that you believe that.
Okay. Does anybody have anything you want to discuss regarding the Bardo Thodol before we get started? We're approaching the end. I don't think we're going to finish tonight. Excuse me. And like I said, we're going to be taking a break over the holiday here, so we won't pick back up again until the first week in January. Okay, so to get us back into the groove of Bardo Thodol and our practice, so we should recite the root verses of the 6 intermediate states. So, Gary, would you like to do that, please, to recite that? That's on page 1 through the end of that section. And then for the next part, after Gary is finished, and the next part would be the 10-branch prayer. So, John, I don't think you've recited anything in a little while. Is that true? Would you like to recite the 10-branch prayer?
Okay.
All right, thank you. And then Bhavani, can I ask Bhavani to recite the purification practice on page 14, including the 100-syllable mantra? Is Bhavani,
Okay.
can you do that, Bhavani?
You can ask all day long.
Certainly.
All right, well, good. All right, so if we can begin with that when Gary is ready, and then we'll continue on after we're finished these prayers to get our mind. We're trying to bring our mindfulness back together again on the purpose of the Bardo Thodol. So Gary, when you're ready, please begin.
Root verses of the 6 intermediate states. According to this cycle of teachings, the cycle of birth and death can be seen as being composed of 6 intermediate states. These 6 modalities of existence are waking living state, dreaming, meditation, the time of death, and the 2 successive phases of the after-death state are defined in the glossary. This poem emphasizes the centrally important perspective that relates to each of these states. It is recommended that practitioners should memorize these verses and recite them repeatedly while reflecting on their meaning throughout their lives. I bow down to the conquerors, the peaceful and wrathful deities. Alas, now as the intermediate state of living arises before me, renouncing laziness for which there is no time in this life, I must enter the undistracted path of study, reflection, and meditation, taking perceptual experience and the nature of mind as the path. I must cultivate the actualization of the 3 Buddha bodies. Now, having obtained a precious human body, this one time, I do not have the luxury of remaining on a distracted path. Alas, now as the intermediate state of dreams arises before me, renouncing the corpse-like insensitive sleep of delusion, I must enter free from distracting memories, the state of abiding nature of reality, cultivating the experience of inner radiance through the recognition, emanation, and transformation of dreams. I must not sleep like a beast, but cherish the experiential cultivation which mingles sleep with actual realization. Alas, now as the intermediate state of meditative concentration arises before me, renouncing the mass of distractions and confusions, I must undistractedly enter a state which is devoid of subjective apprehension and free from the 2 extremes, and attain stability in the stages of generation and perfection. At this moment, having renounced activity, having attained a singular concentration, I must not fall under the sway of bewildering mental afflictions. Alas, now as the intermediate state of the time of death arises before me, renouncing all attachments, yearning, and subjective apprehension in every respect, I must undistractedly enter the path on which the oral teachings are clearly understood, and eject my own awareness into the uncreated expanse of space, immediately upon separation from this compounded body of flesh and blood. I must know this body to be like a transient illusion. Alas, now as the intermediate state of reality arises before me, renouncing the merest sense of awe, terror, or fear, I must recognize all that arises to be awareness, manifesting naturally of itself. Know such sounds, lights, and rays to be visionary phenomena of the intermediate state. At this moment, having reached this critical point, I must not fear the assembly of peaceful and wrathful deities, which manifests naturally. Alas, now as the intermediate state of rebirth arises before me, I must, with one pointed intention, concentrate my mind and resolutely connect with the residual potency of my virtuous past actions. I must obstruct the womb entrance and call to mind the methods of reversal. This is the time when perseverance and purity of perception are imperative. I must give up all jealousy and meditate on my spiritual teacher with consort. From the mouth of the accomplished masters come these words. O you with your mind far away, thinking death will not come, entranced by the pointless activities of this life. If you were to return empty-handed now, would not your life's purpose have been utterly confused? Recognize what it is that you truly need. It is a sacred teaching for liberation. So, should you not practice this divine sacred teaching beginning from this very moment? And it is also said, if I choose not to take the oral teachings of the spiritual teacher to heart, am I not the deceiver of myself?
Natural liberation of habitual tendencies. The 10-branch prayer for the accumulation of merit. Visualize in the space before you the 3 precious jewels and the deities of the 100 enlightened families, and then recite as follows. The branch of taking refuge. Om Ahum. I respectfully take refuge inseparably from now until enlightenment in the infinitude of peaceful and wrathful deities, the conquerors gone to bliss, the 3 precious jewels, the meditational deities, the ocean of Dakinis, and the assembly of oath-bound protectors, within the infinite Buddha fields reaching to the limits of space. I request the branch of initiation. I request the infinite, peaceful, and wrathful deities of the 10 directions and 4 times, compassionate emanations embodying discriminative awareness and skillful means, pervading the vast infinite space of reality's expanse, to come to this place for the sake of all living beings. Rejoice and summon. The branch of requesting the deities to be seated. I request that the meditational deities be seated here on sun, moon, and lotus cushions, symbolizing skillful means, discriminative awareness, and their stainless union. Upon their bejeweled thrones fashioned in the form of lions and so forth, in an attitude of unblemished supreme delight, within this mandala of pristine cognition, which is the natural purity of phenomenal existence. The branch of paying homage. I bow down to the assembly of peaceful and wrathful conquerors, to the father and mother deities and all their offspring, whose essence is the pristine cognition of Samantabhadra, displaying as uncorrupted bliss in the secret womb of Samantabhadri, the branch of making offerings. I request the peaceful and wrathful conquerors, the oceans of those gone to bliss, to partake of these inestimable outer, inner, and secret offerings, both those actually arrayed and those mentally emanated, which are offered for the benefit of all beings. The branch of the confession of negativity. I acknowledge and remorsefully confess all my negative obscurations and all my habitual tendencies of body, speech, and mind, beginninglessly influenced by the three poisons, which are the accumulating causes for rebirth. Among the lower states of suffering in cyclic existence, the branch of sympathetic rejoicing. I rejoice with great delight in the Buddha fields of supreme bliss, where all phenomenal existence is recognized as the pervasion of reality's expanse. I rejoice in all compassionate acts, in their merits and in their altruistic intention, and in all deeds that are the source of merit and pristine cognition. Branch of turning the wheel of the sacred teachings. I exhort the teachers throughout the fields of the 10 directions, who are numerous as atoms, to stir from their meditative commitments for the sakes of all sentient beings, and to turn the wheel of the sacred teachings, thus entirely pervading the reaches of space. The branch of requesting the Buddhas not to enter nirvana. I beseech you, O teachers, infinite Buddhas, without exception, to remain present and not to pass to parinirvana. And I continue to enact the deeds of extensive benefit for the sake of beings until the world systems of cyclic existence have been emptied. The branch of dedication of merit to the unsurpassed greater vehicle. By the power of whatever past, present, and future virtues I accumulate, may all sentient beings throughout the furthest reaches of space mature into worthy recipients of the unsurpassed greater vehicle, and then swiftly attain the status of the infinite, peaceful, and wrathful deities. As the 10-branch prayer is concluded, the Lama visualizes that all the objects of refuge melt into light and then gradually dissolve into the crowns of each of the attending persons, including the dying person and himself.
Natural liberation of habitual tendencies, purification. It is the unified intention of the body, speech, and mind of the 42 peaceful and 58 wrathful deities of the great Buddha field that displays the wisdom that cuts through all ignorance to manifest their wisdom for the benefit of the enlightenment of all sentient beings. Om Ahum Bodhicitta Mahasukha Jana Datu Ah Om Rulu Rulu Hum Jo Hum. Om Ahum Bodhicitta Mahasukha Jana Datu Ah Om Rulu Rulu Hum Jo Hum. Om Ahum Bodhicitta Mahasukha Jana Datu Ah Om Rulu Rulu Hum Jo Hum. From the field of reality's expanse, uncreated and pure, within a celestial palace, which is a seminal point of light, pure, unceasing, and radiant, through the natural expressive power of one's own mind, uncontrived and empty, intrinsic awareness, radiant and empty, arises in the form of Vajrasattva, seated upon a bejeweled throne adorned with lotus, sun, and moon cushions. The right hand holds a Vajra at the heart, symbolizing the union of awareness of absolute wisdom and emptiness. The left hand supports a bell resting on the hip, symbolizing the union of wisdom, appearances, and emptiness. And the head is adorned with a garland of perfect Buddhas, representing the 5 enlightened families of those gone to bliss. Thus, Vajrasattva manifests in the form of the Buddha body of perfect resource, exquisitely adorned with silks and jewels, seated in the posture of royal ease, with the right leg extended and the left drawn in. Radiating at the heart is the seed syllable hum, surrounded by the 100-syllable mantra. Om Basra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Basra Sattva Tenopa Sitsa Drido Me Bhava Suptokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sarva Kama Sutsa Me Sitsantriya Kuruham Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Basra Mame Mutsa Basra Baba Maha Samaya Sattva. Do you want more? Okay. Om Basra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Basra Sattva Tenopa Sitsa Drido Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sarva Karma Sutsa Me Sitsantriya Kuruhang Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Basra Mame Mutsa Basra Baba Maha Samaya Sattva. Om Basra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Basra Sattva Tenopa Sitsa Drido Me Bhava Suptokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sarva Kama Sutsa Me Sitsantriya Kuruhang Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Basra Mame Mutsa Basre Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva.
Very good. Thank you all. Any questions, comments now? Okay. Earlier this week, Louisa and I had a very interesting phone conversation. And everybody's welcome to write or call me or whatever. If you want to have a one-on-one conversation, we'll make a time and do that. So Louisa and I did that. And something really good came out of it in that to be able to kind of break through this understanding of what the wrathful deities are, what they represent, who they are, and so on. So if I mistake something that we talked about, Louisa, please come right in and correct me, because maybe my mind is skipped a beat or something like that. But these are called the wrathful deities, and wrathful to me implies a degree of anger, a degree of hatefulness, of aggression, something like that, that has a very strong negative connotation to it. The wrathful deities, as they are, portrayed here in the Bardo Thodol, are not that. There are no hateful deities in any of Buddhism. There are no aggressive Buddhas or Bodhisattvas in the Bardo Thodol. What they are is fierce. They are there to be able to bring beings to the level of awareness where they can see the causes of their negativity, of their confusion, and so on. The peaceful deities would have done this very peacefully, very calmly, and so on like that. And it doesn't always work, because sometimes the negativity, the emotion that is being brought to bear is very, very, very strong. And the peacefulness is not reaching that far to be able to have someone to settle down. Remember, all this is within ourselves. And sometimes we get so, churned up about emotional things and so on, that somebody's saying, oh, calm down, let me help you calm down. it just isn't strong enough. So sometimes somebody might have to say, look, you need to sit down, I need to do this with you. We need to dance this through, maybe we've got a lot of energy going on. Well, let's try and work off some of that energy by doing a dance together or something like that to try and bring, that confusion under control. So an analogy that came out of our conversation was it's very much like parents for their children. When their children are about to do something that's really going to harm them or harm somebody else, and there's no time for pacification. There's no time for saying, oh, we got to take a time out, go sit in the corner or something like that. There's no time for that. It's way past that. Maybe the kid is running out into the middle of the street and you can see that there's a truck coming down the street. You have to launch immediately into action to be able to rescue that child before they're going to be crushed by that oncoming truck. In the process of doing that, you may get very animated. You may get, very fierce, not wrathful, but it's your great compassion that is putting yourself at risk, because now you may get hurt in the process of doing this. You may run down a flight of steps and risk, your falling down or something like that, running out in the street. You may risk, the truck hitting you, something like that. And all that just goes from your mind. All that you can think of is the compassion that you have for your child and being able to rescue them. In the process of doing that, there might be something that happens that, we might consider to be some kind of bodily harm for the child. You might, by your force, you may have to throw them to the ground or something like that, to throw them out of the way, But all this is indicative of that fierce compassion that we need to have to rescue our child. So all the wrathful deities that are being expressed in the Bardo Thodol are like that. They're showing that great power. And the artists who have characterized, these images and so on as being, these big, fearsome and deities and Padmasambhava, and the way that he characterized these in his descriptions and so on, was in order to show that our own bodily concerns need to be overcome. That even, we look at these images here and we see body parts and so on, and we, just like a parent who is running to rescue their child, they have no concern for their own bodily welfare. So it's all symbolic of our doing this for the sake of being able to bring ourselves down from what is this great, how would you say, confusion, this great antagonism that is going on within ourselves, this great challenge that is going within ourselves, to be able to subdue us to a point that then maybe the peaceful deities then kind of kick in, or they're able to do their work. So these wrathful deities are emanations of the peaceful deities. So the peaceful deities see that, these beings are in a self-destructive mode or in a dangerous mode. So they elevate their power, their compassion, to being more forceful. So all this energy is being expressed, is being seen here in that way. So does that make any sense? Does that help anybody? Does anybody want to discuss this to being able to understand this? So, write it down someplace. The wrathful deities are fierce deities with great, great, great compassion. Great compassion for wisdom, for ourselves, great joy for ourselves, for other beings, and great equanimity. They are very expressive bodhicitta power. So keeping that in mind.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So all this, of course, bears contemplation. You know, hearing me say this one time may make some kind of a difference, but, you know, you need to churn that through your own mind, you know, in your own contemplation, say, well, does that mean in this situation? Or does it mean in that situation? Because you'll come up with all these different things, all these different doubts. Well, maybe it doesn't work here. And so you gotta process that. You gotta go through that. So you gotta open yourself up to that process of elimination, of seeing how this works. It works in every single combination of factors. Their compassion is indescribable, it is indestructible. That's the right word. Their compassion is indestructible. So moving forward, we've talked about the Haruka class of deities, which were the five family of the male and the female of the peaceful deities, who then are emanating as these wrathful deities, the male and the female. And so when they had all these characteristics in the implements, we talked all about that. So now we're coming to a part on page 43 is where I believe we left off last time. If that's not correct, let me know. But I think that's where we left off. And what we are coming to now are the Matara deities. Now, if you remember back several months ago when we were talking about this in the Bardo Thodol, I used the analogy that there's like this great ocean of suffering, and that the beings are in this ocean of suffering, or about to enter this ocean of suffering. And this Matara class of deities, there's 8 of them, are there to protect beings from falling into the ocean. And for those who are in the ocean, to be able to rescue them, pulling them out. So if we're going through the Bardo of reality, and we pass through all the peaceful deities, and now we're coming through the Haruka class of deities, and we haven't responded to those Haruka class of deities who are there to help us with their implements and so on. So now we're approaching that ocean of suffering. We're falling down back into this ocean of suffering again. So these Matara deities are there to help us, to protect us. They're like guarding, you know, and maybe they'll and maybe they'll have to feel like they're tackling us, or they're grabbing us, or doing something to keep us from falling in. Or maybe we've fallen in and they're there to pull us out. So this is their work. This is what they do. And just like all these deities are all facets of ourselves, so are the Matara deities facets of ourselves. And in the situation where we can rescue somebody, we will do everything we can to rescue them, particularly if it's someone that we love and so on. It's easy to see that. But to be able to do that for a stranger, to be able to do that for somebody who may have a malevolent intent to want to harm us or somebody, for us to want to do that for them might be more difficult, but yet we would do that because that's how pure we are as the Matara. All these deities, they have nothing to lose. They're already liberated. There's nothing that they fear. There's no concerns about harming themselves or other beings. Everything they do is for the benefit of the enlightenment of all beings. So these deities, these Matara now, have these very wrathful postures and so on. And if you look at page 43, you see on the right side is one of the deities who is yellow in color. His name is Kari. And on the left is Sari, Gauri, but it's pronounced Sari, one of the idiosyncrasies of the Tibetan language. And then on the next page, 44 and 45 on the left-hand side, you're seeing other images of these Matara deities. And they're very wrathful looking deities, very strange and so on. And they have different body parts that they may be having and so on. And that shows their transcendence, the transcendence of the terror of what an ordinary human being would be risking, because we don't want to subject ourselves to that kind of terror. They have no terror, so it doesn't matter to them. So they're demonstrating that through these bodily images that we see with all the different things that they have, the body parts and so on. So we're not going to dwell on this. You can spend some time on this more. You can read about this more and everything. I'm not going to spend any time on it, but I do think it's important to read this so that as we've been reading everything, it comes into our consciousness, and whether it registers or how it registers at this point is not as important as the fact that transmission is there. And you heard it as best as I can, a heart transmission. And it's meant with great compassion. The purpose is with great compassion and with wisdom, that these are the words of Padmasambhava. There's been translated for us. There's great blessing, and there's great joy in this, and there's great equanimity in this, that all beings are the same and so on. So let it come into you. And if you don't, try not to get attached to it, and try not to get aversion to it, but bring it onto the path. When your time is ready, in your personal practice, because that's what this is. We're talking about the daily main practice of the Bardo Thodol. We're not reading this for someone who is past. We are reading this for ourselves in order to prepare ourselves for the time that it is that we come to pass. So we're familiarizing ourselves with these concepts of a human being that needs to be transcended. So I'll begin on page 43. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Just please speak right up.
I have a question, Lance.
Yes.
The term Mahotera, tell us what those two words, what is the Maho, what is the Tara, or is it Tara? It just is a term I've never seen before.
I don't know. And it's pronounced Matara. Matara.
Okay, thanks.
So I don't have a good explanation for it. It would be interesting if somebody did discover something like that and share it with us. Okay, so Om Ahom. Amidst an expanse of light, in the eastern channel branch of one skull stands Sari, white in color, holding a human corpse, cudgel, and a skull. Amidst an expanse of light, in the southern channel branch of one skull stands Kari, yellow in color, shooting an arrow from a bow. Amidst an expanse of light, in the western channel branch of one skull stands Pramoa, red in color, holding a crocodile victory banner. Amidst an expanse of light, in the northern channel branch of one skull stands Vitali, black in color, holding a vajra and a blood-filled skull. Amidst an expanse of light, in the southeastern channel branch of one skull stands Pukasi, red yellow in color, clutching and devouring entrails. Amidst an expanse of light, in the southwestern channel branch of one skull stands Gazmari, green-black in color, stirring a blood-filled skull with a vajra. Amidst an expanse of light, in the northwestern channel branch of one skull stands Kandali, pale yellow in color, clutching a human corpse and eating his heart. Amidst an expanse of light, in the northeastern channel branch of one skull stands Smasani, blue-black in color, tearing apart the head and body of a bloated corpse. Om Ah Hum, to you, the 8 Matara, beginning with Sari, who are embodiments of the 8 classes of consciousness, I bow down, make offerings, take refuge and pray. As soon as we, the deceased, die and begin to transmigrate, at that very moment, when the visions of the intermediate state of reality dawn, and we, the deceased, roam alone in cyclic existence, driven by the deep-seated confused perceptions, may the 4 Matara, beginning with Sari, draw us forward, leading us on a path of multicolored light, which is the vibrance of the sounds, lights, and rays of the 8 classes of consciousness. May the 4 Matara, beginning with Pukasi, support us from behind, and thus encircled, may we be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfected Buddha. So now to go back to where we started with this section here. So remember, this is in the skull, in the cranium. This is the brain. So we're working on mental misconceptions. The mental misconceptions that create the emotions that block the heart. The peaceful deities are in the heart center. The wrathful deities are in the brain in order to be able to intellectualize, to be able to analyze, to be able to see and possibly correct those things that are going to manifest or to, well, I said to correct those things that would manifest as those blockages. So it's part of the process here. So the thing that is being accentuated are the 8 consciousnesses. So we haven't talked about this, although it is part of what would be called a Buddhism 201. If you wanted to engage in some higher level Buddhism 101 into Buddhism 201, we could talk about the 8 levels of consciousness. But basically, they are the 5 senses, our sense of sight, our sense of hearing, our sense of smell, our sense of taste, our sense of touch. So those are 5 of the consciousnesses. The next is the mental aspect that is taking that information that's coming in from our sense organs. It's not making any evaluation at all. It's just taking it in. It's like a camera just sees an image, and if you click the shutter, it's going to capture that image, but it's not making any kind of judgment about what it is. So these images come in, then our brain begins to process these and begins to make associations with these and begins that process of making judgments. Judgments that will be either beneficial to us, or what we view as being beneficial to us, or maybe being harmful to us, or maybe being neutral to us. So the brain is processing that in, and that is the 6th level of consciousness. The 7th level of consciousness is what we call the karmic level of consciousness, that we are imputing all this stuff that is coming in we're imputing it with values. And these imputations then imprint into our mind. And they are relative to us. It's relative to the I, me, mine. It's relative to my body. It's relative to my existence that is greater than any other thing that we could imagine. This is the part that holds on the ego, that everything is egocentric. Everything revolves around me. All these things that I'm taking in and processing with my brain is now being applied to my ego, to my persona, to the I, me, mine, who I am. And then all the values then have positive values, have negative values, have neutral values, and so on. All these judgments that we place on these things. So it's very complex. The next one is the 8th level of consciousness, which is called the Elia Consciousness. This is the Elia, A-L-A-Y-A, Elia Consciousness. The Elia Consciousness is most easily described as the storehouse consciousness, that the imprints that the karmic consciousness has made then imprints itself on this Elia consciousness. And this Elia consciousness is very, 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 very subtle. And the closest thing that we can use to be able to understand it is what we would call the soul, S-O-U-L. In Buddhism, we say that all this is all impermanent. All this is temporary. All this is manufactured. All this is just an illusion, including the mind, including this Elia consciousness. But it's this Elia consciousness that's so subtle that we carry this with us from lifetime to lifetime. This is where the karmic seeds are buried. And then in lifetimes to come, or tomorrow or next week or whenever the conditions are right, those karmic seeds are there. And when the conditions are right, all of a sudden those seeds will pop open and they'll come up. And then certain things begin to transpire in our lives based on those conditions and those causes and so on. And it's just our evaluation. It's just our recognizing those things. And because we have these karmic propensities to react in this way, that we will do this. So those karmic seeds are in that Elia consciousness, in that soul. In the soul, for those of us who have heard about and studied, in the Western traditions of Judeo-Christian or whatever, Muslim and so on, and even in Hindu, they talk about the soul. That this is something that is indestructible, that goes through our lives. This is what carries us through our lives and so on. And we can have attachment to that. And we can have aversion to that. And it's that attachment and that aversion which is bringing out, which is illustrating to us its dualistic nature of the Elia consciousness. And as Buddhists, what we are trying to do through our purification practices and so on, through our understanding, through our loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, we are liberating from that, liberating from the Elia consciousness, eliminating the soul, the attachment or the aversion to the soul. Because the Buddha is the essence of freedom. And the Elia consciousness is a last vestige of holding on. And if we can be that resolute to be able to say, all that is just all part of my human existence. And I'm letting it all go. That I'm going beyond that to what it is, I don't know, because it's indescribable. But I've had experience with it through my meditation. I've exhausted all the thoughts that I could bring together to try and be able to understand. And I've exhausted it and say, I can't think about it anymore. I am going to let it go. And I'm going to let myself, to use the expression, just fly away, to liberate. So these 8 levels of consciousness are very, fundamental, and very easy to take the first 6 for granted, totally for granted. And we're kind of ignorant of the karmic. Most people are ignorant of the karmic, but they may have some kind of an attachment or an aversion to the soul part. We do things out of fear that our soul is going to be stained, or out of the exaltation that our soul is going to be pure, and then I'm going to be delivered and be able to go to heaven and enjoy a life of luxury beyond imagination. So these Matara represent all that, or it's through them that we that is saving us. It's through that realization, through that understanding, through that comprehension, through the approaching of what this means, this intellectualization process that saves us from falling into the ocean of suffering, or is that which is pulling us out of the ocean of suffering. So in the, let me see here a second. In the mandala that I sent to everybody, if you need a copy of it printed, I'll be happy to send it to you, but I've sent it to you and you can print it. And here it says Matara is the definition: respective inner channel branch of the skull within the brain, natural transformation of mental constructs associated with the 8 classes of consciousness and the 8 actions. So I just gave you the 8 consciousness, the 8 classes of consciousness, and the 8 actions in which they precipitate. So it's pretty heavy stuff. Any comments or questions? No?
Lance, I once heard
Louisa, you're next. Go ahead, Debbie.
I once heard the 8th consciousness, the Elia, described as if it were a plate glass window with fingerprints on it, and that you're inside looking out on this garden. And as you said, to get through that and be freed outside is the objective. And it's that Elia consciousness, very subtle, very thin, but very much something to be recognized for what it is and passed beyond.
So
I
using
love the
that
way you described
analogy,
it.
so using that analogy, how do we do that?
You could get out your Windex and purify, clean the fingerprints.
How about we shatter it?
Shatter it or slide the door open. Yes.
Excuse me, Louisa?
wrong button. So is the spirit and the soul the same thing? Or are they different?
Well, that's a
in
good
the
question,
Buddhist
isn't it?
lesson?
That's a good question, isn't it? So here, what we're saying the Elia is a consciousness level. And the
Mhm.
spirit we've defined as simply connection. Now, there are many different definitions of spirit, which give it, ghostly apparitions and beings that talk to you and all these kinds of spiritual objects and so on. But in Buddhism, we look at it, we consider it to be just simply the connection that we have with all phenomenal life as it is. The suchness of life is the spirituality of that. And that spirituality is the essence of that comes from that which cannot be separated. The Dharmakaya. That this is all the display of that Dharmakaya. So they're two very different things.
Okay.
The spiritual.
Because when I think, yeah,
Go ahead.
when I think of spirit, I think we each individually have our own spirit. And what I hear you saying,
in Buddhism, that would be false. We share the same spirit. We share the same spirit. It's that vibration, and we're just using these terms to describe something that's indescribable.
yes, when you say vibration, I understand that much more now. We all have our levels of vibration.
So the idea of the soul is unique. We each have our soul.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Okay. Is it making sense? Okay. I don't see any.
Am I hearing that these are 8 forms of consciousness?
Well, 8 levels of consciousness.
8 different levels of consciousness.
Awareness. Yes.
Okay, and it's an awareness of each thing, and the 8th awareness is the one that breaks through all of the breaks through to the awareness of being a Buddha.
Not exactly, no. The Elia consciousness, the 8th level, would keep us from being a Buddha.
Would keep us from being a Buddha?
Correct. Because we are attached to that Elia consciousness, like we're attached to the soul. That's why the soul is a good metaphor for that. And to be able to let go of that, to be able to say, I have no soul, is really a powerful statement.
But you just said that we all share the same soul.
I didn't say that. I said we share the same spirit. I said we share, we share this vibration. And I was just equating that to a definition of the spirit. But even that is a concept that is a display of that which can expressed. That's the Buddha. So the Buddha, the literal translation of the Sanskrit word Buddha is awakened one.
Yes.
So in our mind, that should mean awakened, to be able to see, awake to all things, and which implies that we in this state may be asleep in many, many things. We
Pretty
don't
much,
know. We don't know what we don't know.
That's true.
But the Buddha does, you see, and the Buddha is not a being. So we don't, and that's one of the things that we got to recognize, that the Buddha is not a being as we know a being.
What changes him from being a human being to a Buddha being?
That's the Tathagata, the thus gone one, or the Sugata, the well gone one. So it's
Can you
beyond beyond our imaginations. And the concept of Buddha, then, I mean, the implication there is that you have to go beyond the concept of the Buddha. Those of you who are, my age, or read the books from my time, that probably, and there's many more before that, believe me, but there was a thing, you got to kill the Buddha. Which means we have to kill our concept of what we think the Buddha is. Because that begins to hold us back. So total liberation is a mind blower.
To that point, Lance, isn't that other beautiful analogy of it's like we've lived our entire life, or countless lives, in a house on the very, very pinnacle of a high mountain. And at some point, the walls of the house simply fall away. And we realize that there's this vast openness, and that actually we were always a part of it. And so I've just always loved that analogy of that, those walls are artificial, and they aren't the defining reality. They're just relative and temporary, and they fall away.
Yeah. And so the Buddha said, Shakyamuni Buddha said, we're all Buddha. We just don't realize it. But, so we can attain Buddhahood in this life. But that means to be, free at the level that, we're talking about here. That all this intellectualization is unnecessary. We do it out of compassion for the sake of those who request, the wisdom. And we do it with joy. But whether those beings are requesting it or not, we still have that joy. There is still that joy. And there is still the awareness of sameness, of the equanimity, the bodhicitta, in other words. Okay. So good comments, questions. Okay, so now we go to, let me see if I missed anything here that needs to be talked about. Well, let me go back to page 45 and this prayer. So Om Ahong, and the body, the speech, and the mind. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones. So the enlightened ones, that's, would you say that the bodhisattvas are enlightened? Yes, they have a degree of enlightenment. Are they perfectly enlightened? Not necessarily. So may we be on that path. And Dzogchen, this is one of the great things about the Dzogchen way it describes, the three, the ground, the path, and the result, or the fruition. And we start off on the ground and we say, I want to get to the fruition. I want to get to the result. The result is enlightenment. And then we recognize that there's a pathway for us to move along to get to that enlightenment. So from the ground we begin, and we begin building up all this stuff. We begin identifying all this stuff and everything as being positive, negative, making value judgments and all this. And then we're putting this on this path, this way of being able to analyze all this and so on, and to be able to eliminate our attachments to it and our aversions to it along the way. And then we find we get to the result, to the fruition, and all that we find out is we were there the whole time. We had it in the ground. We just didn't recognize it. So we're trying to get rid of our mental misconceptions. This is what the Haruka class, this is what the Wrathful Deities work on. So with that great compassion, with that great effort that is required, that's how much we need to study. That's how much we need to practice. Everybody would just like to sit back and say, oh, I'm just going to meditate on shamatha and all this is going to come to me. It's going to save me in the end. I want to die in meditation. It's all I need to do. So that's kind of like the story of, well, when you die, St. Peter's going to meet you at the gate. He's going to take you to meet God, and God's going to look you up in the book and decide what to do with you. I'm not trying to disparage somebody else's religion, but from a point of view, that's the way many people have that. The essence of that point of view, though, there's a truth to the essence of that freedom. And they're creating this story, which is false. It's relative. It's true at some level, but then you cross that threshold and now it becomes false. And then there's maybe another truth there, depending on what level you're crossing through. Okay, so I was going to read this here. Om Ahong, to you, the 8 Matara, beginning with the Sari, who are embodiments of the 8 classes of consciousness. So they represent those 8 classes. So we could go through and talk about each one at a time. And if that's what you want to do, but I would recommend that you study the book, this book or other books on it, to get more information about it. That's how you make it yours. I bow down, make offerings, take refuge, and pray. As soon as we, the deceased, die and begin to transmigrate, at that very moment, when the visions of the intermediate state of reality dawn, may we, the deceased, roam alone in cyclic existence, driven by the deep-seated confused perceptions. May the 4 Matara, beginning with Sari, draw us forward, leading us on the path of multicolored light, which is the vibrance. The vibrance. What is vibrance? Vibrating. That vibrating, that vibrance that is going through all of our being, all of relative nature. the vibrance of the sounds, lights, and rays of the 8 classes of consciousness. If light, is moving at a certain speed, if you slow it down, it changes color. If you slow it down even more, you can hear it. You can hear the vibration. If you slow it down even more, you can feel it. May the 4 Matara, beginning with Pukasi, support us from behind, and thus encircled may we be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. So what they're saying is, so these 8 Matara are, 4 of them are the cardinal directions: east, south, west, and north. And they're like in front of us. And then the 8 intermediate ones, southeast, southwest, northwest, northeast, they are supporting us from behind. So we're completely surrounded by these Matara deities in our heads. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the next group here, is page 47. Wait a minute.
46, I think.
Yes, 46. Thank you. Yes. Om Ahong. Amidst an expanse of light, in the eastern channel branch of one's skull stands lion-headed Simamukhi, brown-black in color, carrying a corpse in her mouth. Amidst an expanse of light, in the outer southern channel branch of one's skull stands tiger-headed Vajramukhi, red in color, with her 2 arms crossed. Amidst an expanse of light, in the outer western channel branch of one's skull stands fox-headed Shrigalamuki, black in color, eating entrails. Amidst an expanse of light, in the outer northern channel branch of one's skull stands wolf-headed Svanamuki, blue-black in color, tearing apart a bloated corpse. Amidst an expanse of light, in the outer southeastern channel branch of one skull stands vulture-headed Grigamuti, white-yellow in color, carrying a corpse draped over her shoulders. Amidst an expanse of red light, of light in the outer southwestern channel branch of one skull stands kite-headed Kankamuki, red-black in color, carrying a large human corpse. Amidst an expanse of light, in the outer northwestern channel branch of one skull stands crow-headed Kakamuki, black in color, brandishing a skull and a sword. Amidst an expanse of light, in the outer northeastern channel branch of one skull stands owl-headed Olukamuki, dark blue in color, holding a vajra. Page 48. Om Ahong, to you, the 8 Paskachi, beginning with Simamukhi, who are embodiments of the 8 sensory objects. I bow down, make offerings, take refuge and pray. As soon as we, the deceased, die and begin to transmigrate, at that very moment, when the visions of the intermediate state of reality dawn, and we, the deceased, roam alone in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated confused perceptions, may the 4 Paskachi, starting with Simhamukhi, draw us forward, leading us on a path of pure, radiant, multicolored light, which is the purity of the naturally manifesting 8 objects of consciousness. May the 4 Paskachi, starting with Grigamukhi, support us from behind, and thus encircled may we be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. One thing about this, and this goes to Curtis's question, these are all female. The Matara are female, and the Paskachi are female as well. So that Matara, and so Tara being a root word of Matar, Ma being I'm not a translator, but the Ma,
Cognate.
what's that?
It's the word is cognate.
What does that mean?
It has a similar root. Ma, mother, female,
Oh, okay.
cognate.
Well, I was thinking that Ma doesn't Ma also mean a negativity or a heaviness to that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I shouldn't even mention.
Well, whatever, mata. But mata is another cognate with mother.
All right.
So
Well,
it probably is just all referring to the mother.
it'd be great for
Lance,
somebody.
you're right, Lance. Maripa is ignorance. And
Right.
that's yeah.
It's a negative expression of the root word. Yeah. So maybe that it's using that to say that this is a wrathful deity. But sometimes that's the failure of the language, because it's connotated to be, a wrathfulness or a hatefulness or something like that. So that's a bit of a problem, because it's not. Okay, so back to these Pisachi. So these now are the Pisachi. Whoops, what happened here? Sorry. Okay, so the Pisachi, the meaning of the Pisachi is the respective outer channel branch of the skull within the brain, the natural transformation of mental constructs associated with the objects of the 8 classes of consciousness and the 8 actions. So what this means is these beings, the Pisachi, are in the ocean of suffering. The Matara were around the periphery. These beings are in the ocean. Being in the ocean, they are subject to these objects of consciousness, the ones that we went through, the 8 objects of consciousness, that they are focused on them. In the first group, it was the mental constructs. The Matara is the mental constructs of these 8 consciousnesses. Now it's more solidified in the objects, the very objects of these. So we're in that ocean. It's harder to get away from it. Now we're seeing the things, we're tasting the things, we're thinking the things. Our ego is invested in the things. And our Elia consciousness is being stored up with the results of these things, with the imputations of these things. So if you remember, when we talked about this several months ago, I said that these beings, these Pisachi, are in the ocean of suffering, and what they are doing is they are stirring up the ocean of suffering. Why? To keep us from sinking to the bottom. That's their work. That's their job, to keep them from sinking, so that maybe we can rise to the surface and be rescued by the Matara, pulled out by the Matara. Without the Pisachi, we're bound to fall into the bottom of the ocean, where all the defilement, and then going down through the drain into the bowels of consciousness, or bowels of living, or however you wish to explain it, into the next lower level of being reborn again. So their images and the implements that they are holding are all body parts, showing their transcendence of the very things that are pulling us down. there are a number of practices, we talk about in Buddhism, and the dakinis, that you see them, and all the dakinis, the enlightened dakinis, the high dakinis, the Vajrayogini class of dakinis, they're all in a dancing posture, and they're all in their left hand, they're holding a hook knife, a curved knife. And in their right hand, they're all holding a skull cup filled with blood. And in their left shoulder, they're holding a kadvanga, which represents the three kayas, represents the male aspect. They represent the wisdom aspect. And so with this hook knife, they are cutting off the roots of attachment, the roots of aversion, the roots of jealousy, the roots of emotions. They're cutting them off, and so on. And with the skull cup in the blood is the unqualified enjoyment of the phenomenal nature. So the point here is to become familiar with this, so that we're not surprised by it and being pulled away from it, being pulled away from our transcendence. If we're moving upward, to use the illustration, that we're moving upward, but then if these thoughts come into our mind about these gruesome things, and it pulls us back. So whatever, upward motion that we have accomplished now is being pulled back down by these things. So I think maybe the greatest of all these techniques in Buddhism, Tantric Buddhism, is the Chod practice. And the Chod practice is done by these yogis and yoginis who go to a charnel ground, go to a cemetery where they, crematorium, they go to the places of the sky burial and so on, and they do their practices there. And there's littered all around them, bones and body parts and stuff like that. So in other words, they are familiarizing themselves with all this, what seemed to be gruesome aspect, but they are transcending it. And now it doesn't bother them anymore. They've overcome it. So I know how crazy that sounds. And we do that a little bit at a time, In this lifetime, we may not have the wherewithal to be able to do that. And it's better to just let it rest and concentrate on the things, that we can work on, make obtainable goals for yourselves. But if you're not ready for that, if it becomes, that you can't see the clarity of it, then just let it rest. Just let it rest. Talk with your Lama, talk with your teacher, talk with your brothers and sisters about it, and gain confidence in what it is that you can do. So these are the 8 Piscaci. So I'm just going to recite this for tonight, and we're going to leave it here because we're going to do some other prayers. And so I'm on page 48. Om Ahom, the body, speech, and mind. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of the Piscaci. To you, the 8 Piscaci, beginning with Simamukhi, who are the embodiments of the 8 sensory objects, I bow down, make offerings, take refuge, and pray. As soon as we, the deceased, die and begin to transmigrate, at that very moment, when the visions of the intermediate state of reality dawn, and we, the deceased, roam alone in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated confused perceptions, may the 4 Piscaci, starting with Simamukhi, draw us forward, leading us on a path of pure, radiant, multicolored light, which is the purity of the naturally manifesting 8 objects of consciousness. May the 4 Pisachi, starting with Grigamukhi, support us from behind, and thus encircled may we be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. As soon as we, the deceased. So we're practicing our meditation. This is for ourselves, we, the deceased. And I used this, some time ago, that we, the deceased, like we are the Grateful Dead, and the music that came out of that period of the 60s and the 70s, and much of the, a lot of the literature, a lot of the stories that came out of the 50s and the 60s and so on, that predated the music and everything, was based on this idea of liberation. And realizing that we're walking around, like living dead, and we're awakening from that state of dullness, of unconsciousness, of ignorance. And so those songs and those stories, those books and everything were objects that were things to be joyous about. They were leading us on. If you're interested in the 8 consciousnesses and studying them, there's a great book called Everyday Consciousness and Primordial Awareness by Trenggu Rinpoche. Trenggu Rinpoche is like the head of the Karma Kagyu. Well, he's not, excuse me, I'm saying that wrong. He is a very prominent person in the Karma Kagyu lineage. I don't think he's the head of it. That would be the Karmapa, wouldn't it? But nevertheless, he's a great teacher. There's many books that he's written and many films of teachings that he's given and so on. And so this is the 8 consciousnesses, everyday consciousness, and the and primordial awareness.
Primordial awareness or primordial consciousness?
Primordial awareness. I've read it many times, and I've got a great teaching on it if you'd like to engage in the teaching sometime. Okay, so for tonight, we're going to leave it here. So we talked about now the Matara and the Pisachi in this ocean of suffering and being able to rescue us from this ocean of suffering before we fall further into the depths of rebirth. Any comments or questions now? Okay. And don't forget, you can use this as a guide. It's really good. It's very comprehensive. And you may need a few minutes to familiarize yourself with the way it works, but it's a great tool. Okay. So there's no comment. So we'll turn to page 207. Okay. So this is the aspirational prayer to rescue from the dangerous pathways of the intermediate state. So let's see who hasn't read in a little while. So Tom, will you read this, the aspirational prayer on page 207? And then after this, Curtis, would you read, please? And I know you read last time, but so did Michael and everybody else. So, so Curtis, will you read the aspirational prayer that protects from fear on page 214?
Gotcha.
Okay, and then I'll tell you what, Tom, when you're finished, and before Curtis starts, let's take a short discussion break, see if there's any questions or comments that we can reflect on each of these two prayers. Okay, so we've got the time to do that tonight. Okay, Tom, whenever you're ready.
Aspirational prayer, which rescues from the dangerous pathway of the intermediate states. I bow down to the spiritual teachers, meditational deities, and dakinis. May I be guided in the path of their great love. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated bewilderment, may the spiritual teachers holding to the oral lineage draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant, clear light, which is undistracted study, reflection, and meditation. May the supreme consorts, the host of dakinis, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated delusion, may the transcendent Lord Vairocana draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant blue light, which is the pristine cognition of reality's expanse. May the supreme consort Akasa Datashvari support me from behind, and thus encircle, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam and exist in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated aversion, may the transcendent Lord Vajrasattva Akshobhya draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant white light, which is the mirror-like pristine cognition. May the supreme consort Buddha Lokana support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated pride, may the transcendent Lord Ratnasambhava draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant yellow light, which is the pristine cognition of sameness. May the supreme consort Mamaki support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated attachment, may the transcendent Lord Amitabha draw me forward, leading me in the path of radiant red light, which is the pristine cognition of discernment. May the supreme consort Pandara Vasini support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated envy, may the transcendent Lord Amagasiddhi draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant green light, which is a pristine cognition of accomplishment. May the supreme consort Samayatara support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, be escorted to the level of utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by the 5 virulent poisons, may the transcendent conqueror, the male Buddhas of the 5 enlightened families, draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant rainbow light, which is the 4 pristine cognitions combined. May the 5 supreme female Buddhas, the purity of the expanse, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the light path of the 6 impure classes of beings, and be escorted to the 5 utterly supreme and pure Buddha fields. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated habitual tendencies, may the assembly of spiritual heroes and awareness holders draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant, multicolored light, which is co-emergent, pristine cognition. May the supreme consorts, the host of Dakini, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence driven by deep-seated, bewildered perception, may the assembly of the blood-drinking, wrathful deities draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant rainbow light, which is free of fear and terrifying perceptions. May the assembly of the Prodeshvari, queen of the expanse, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Om Ahom. May the fields of the five elements not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the five Buddhas. May the elements of space not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the blue Buddha. May the elements of water not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as a field of the white Buddha. May the elements of earth not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the yellow Buddha. May the elements of fire not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the red Buddhas. May the element of wind not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the green Buddha. May the awesome sounds, lights, and rays not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as an infinite field of the peaceful and wrathful deities. May the rainbow-colored elements not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the fields of the manifold Buddhas. May I recognize all sounds as my own sounds. May I recognize all lights as my own lights. May I recognize all rays as my own rays. May I spontaneously recognize the characteristics of the intermediate state. May the fields of the three Buddha bodies be manifest. Samaya.
Very good. Thank you. Would somebody like to comment on this prayer? Michael? No comments? The comprehensiveness of this prayer?
Lance, I find the first paragraph, oh, as I roam in cyclic existence driven by deep-seated bewilderment, absolutely fascinating, because from the second paragraph on, it's all Bardo of reality and the peaceful and wrathful deities. But this first one is the Bardo of living, specifically the Bardo of meditation, in the context of being rescued from dangerous pathways, rescued during meditation and study and reflection by the hosts of Dakinis. And that's just very interesting, because we haven't talked about that Bardo in that way with the Dakinis. And I was wondering if you had any more light to shed on that. It's just fascinating.
Well, we are talking about it. I mean, the Matara are Dakinis and the Piscachi are Dakinis. You know, they're all enlightened Dakinis. You know, that's who they are. Your microphone is muted, Debbie.
Sorry, sticky mic there. Yes, I understand that in the Bardo of reality, and that's coming up later. But this very specifically is on the path of radiant clear light, which is undistracted study, reflection, and meditation. And so it just, maybe I'm misunderstanding it. It feels to me like it's Bardo of living and specifically Bardo of meditation.
Well, that makes
And-
sense. And so what are we studying? What are we contemplating is what all these figures, all these characters that are being described to us in the Bardo Thodol.
Right. Yeah. I guess, yeah, I'm just misunderstanding it, I think. I think maybe by linking it to the Bardo of living, I'm making an error in the context
Well,
of,
that's all that
of
we
this
have.
prayer.
That's
Yeah.
all we have right now. And within the Bardo
Uh-huh.
of living, we have dreams and we have meditative concentration.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so it's pointing that out.
Yeah, I have to reflect on this more because I'm not articulating this well. It's my problem. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. But, okay. So I think, all these things, I mean, it's that circle that we keep going around. The wheel keeps going around, and sometimes it's very detailed and sometimes it's very general, but it becomes a review of those detailed things. And anything that we don't understand means, oh, I got to dig a little deeper. This is the practice that reveals to us what it is that we don't understand. If we understand it all and we're truly the embodiment of it, then that's really great. We're truly on the path and so on. And we're a lot closer to it than we might think we are. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here in the first place. But saying that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to attain liberation in this lifetime. But this should give us joy to be able to recognize we've had many lifetimes and we have many more lifetimes to go. And, bring it on. This is it. This is who I am. This is what it is.
And it does make sense to think of study and reflection and practice of the wrathful deities as being a fearsome passageway in and of itself in meditation. So at that level, I get it.
Okay. Louisa, you had your hand up?
I think I will reflect on the part in this prayer that is really seems to be very meaningful to me, because where you start, may the fields of the five elements not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the fields of the five Buddhas. May the elements of space not arise a hostile force. So you're looking at all these forces that could be hostile to you. And then you're praying that may I see them as a field of blue Buddhas. And on and on and on. And I just love this part of this prayer. And I would like to look at this a little closer, reflect on it, and see where I can find a little more clarity for me and understanding, because it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's like these elements they can become, I'm thinking in my own mind, they can come to you as a hostile force, but you're praying that may I see them as something more beautiful, something that is going to, I just don't have the words for it, but it's just a beautiful part of this prayer.
Yes, I agree. And we look at, this phenomenal nature, which here is being called out to us, the elements, the basic elements, The basic elements are everywhere and so on. And but they're not here to intimidate us or anything like that. They're not happening to us. They're not coming to us in that way, but we are recognizing them as that. We should recognize them in their pure nature. The problem is we have an impure nature. So we have to transcend our impure nature to recognize the purity that is all around us, and thereby we recognize our pure nature. You know, if we're feeling threatened by this, we created that threatening. So by realizing we're all part of the same thing, you know, we're all made up of the same matter. We all have the same type of thoughts going back and forth and so on. And that's the spirituality. And to see it all in that spiritual context. You know, some of it has a very high vibration, so high it's invisible. It's clear. Some of it's slower. We see it as white. Some of it's slower still. We see it as red. Slower still, we see it as green and so on like that. Slower still, we hear it as sound. But it's all there for us to recognize, and that we are part of that. Just our being able to verbalize right now, we are creating a harmonic to that vibration. We are doing the very same thing that all this is doing. We are part of that nature. So thank you for the comment.
I love that section too. And it's almost like the lowest frequency level you're talking about, Lance, the gross physical level. This becomes like the ultimate prayer for the age of climate change.
Yeah.
You know, just thinking last week with this terrible tornado, may the elements of wind not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the green Buddha. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like being reintroduced or introduced again to to the phenomenal world that we've been in and out of numerous times, and being reminded that the phenomenal world is imbued with Buddhahood, that what we're really looking at is not just the stuff that we think we look at every day when we're in our relative reality. It's not just the glass and the tree and the wind and the breeze, and we're not trapped here on Earth as if we're in the basement of the building. You know, we're just seeing what we see. And the elements, I think, like you said, I believe the elements represent the arrival of the phenomenal, but it doesn't make the phenomenal any less phenomenal to be part of the phenomena, because it's, like you said, it's the same stuff. It's the Buddhas. And so we get to look at our dirty everyday life and see the things that the elements are made of, and see the Buddha in that structure.
Okay, thank you. Curtis, will you read the next prayer, please?
We're on page 214, everyone. Aspirational prayer, which protects from fear of the intermediate states. When my life's course is ended and I roam alone in the intermediate states, the loved ones of this world can no longer help me. So, at this critical time, may the conquerors, the peaceful and wrathful deities, quickly release the power. Michael, you need to mute. Thank you. So, at this critical time, may the conquerors, the peaceful and wrathful deities, quickly release the power of their compassion and may the deep darkness of my ignorance be dispelled. When I roam alone, separated from my loved ones, and myriad images of emptiness arise, naturally manifesting, may the Buddhas quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the fear of the awesome and terrifying intermediate state be annulled. When the 5 radiant lights of pristine cognition dawn, may I recognize them as my own nature, and without awe and without terror, and as the manifold forms of the peaceful and wrathful deities arise, may I be fearlessly confident and recognize the characteristics of the intermediate states. When I experience suffering as a result of negative past actions, may the great compassionate one dispel all such misery, and as the natural sound of reality reverberates like 1,000 peals of thunder, may all sounds be heard as the teachings of the greater vehicle. When I'm driven on by past actions, unable to find a refuge, may the meditational deities dispel all such misery. And as I experience the suffering of habitual tendencies and past actions, may the meditative stabilities of inner radiance and bliss naturally arise. When I am miraculously born into the intermediate state of rebirth, may I not be beguiled by the perverse prophecies of Mara. And as I freely arrive at every place that I think of, may the bewildering fear and terror generated by my negative past actions not arise. When the roars of savage wild beasts echo around me, may their cries be transformed into the sound of the sacred teachings, the 6 syllables, Om Mani Padme Hum. And as I am engulfed by snow, rain, wind, and darkness, may I achieve the pure clairvoyance of radiant, pristine cognition. May sentient beings in the intermediate state, similar in kind to myself, be born into the higher realms, free from rivalry, and as severe dissonant mental states generate insatiable hunger and thirst, may the afflictions of hunger, thirst, heat, and cold be annulled. When I see my future parents in union, may I perceive them as Mahakarunika and consort, and for the sake of others, being blessed with the power to choose a birthplace, may I achieve an exalted body adorned with the auspicious major and minor marks. Once I have achieved birth in a supreme human form, may I act so as to swiftly liberate all who see and hear me, and may I not be influenced by my negative past actions, but multiply and emulate my past merits. Wherever I may be born, in whatever land it may be, may I quickly encounter the meditational deity of my past lives. Knowing from immediately after birth how to speak and walk, may I remember my past lives and attain the power of non-forgetfulness. May I easily come to master by study and reflection the manifold stages of learning, small, intermediate, and great. May the country into which I am born be auspicious, and may all sentient beings be blessed with happiness. O peaceful and wrathful conquerors, may I and all others become entirely at one with you and come to resemble you in all your forms, your retinues, your lifespan, and your Buddha fields, and in every quality of your supreme auspicious marks. Through the compassion of Samantabhadra and the infinite peaceful and wrathful deities, by the power of the truth of pure reality, and by the blessing of the mantrants who practice one pointedly, may every wish of this aspirational prayer be fulfilled. Samaya. Composed by the preceptor from Odayana, Padmakara, may this profound sacred teaching not be extinguished until all the worlds of cyclic existence have been emptied. This is the treasure text of Tulku Karma Lingpa.
Thank you very much. We'll have to have discussion on this next time. So can we do our dedication prayers, please?
What about page 219, by the way? Is that supposed to be read?
You can read it if you like.
Okay. Mangara Shri Zwala Jambud Vipa Alankara Bhavantu Sarvamangalam. By the virtue of this Dharma work, may all sentient beings be freed from suffering and attain enlightenment. May all beings and activities be auspicious for the benefit of the enlightenment of all sentient beings.
Mangalam, Sri Zala Zambu Pipa, Alankar Bhavantu, Sarva Mangalam. Okay. Debbie?
Emaho. In the center is the marvelous Buddha Amitabha of boundless light. On the right side is Avalokiteshvara, the Lord of great compassion. On the left is Vajrapani, the Lord of powerful means. All are surrounded by limitless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Immeasurable peace and happiness is the blissful pure land of Dewachen. When I and all beings pass from samsara, may we be born in Dewachen without taking samsaric rebirth. May I have the blessing of meeting Amitabha face to face. By the power and blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, may I attain this aspiration without hindrance. Taya tapensa driya awa bodhanaya soha. Taya tapensa driya awa bodhanaya soha. Taya tapensa driya awa bodhanaya soha. The translation, this is it. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 5 families and 3 times who destroyed defilement lead to the equipoise of the enlightened mind. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. By this virtue, may I achieve all knowingness by defeating all enemies' confusion. May all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of suffering. As Manjushri the warrior realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings.
Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. 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 Om Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Om Ah Hum. Om Ah Hum. Om Ah Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you all very much. So we'll see you the first Friday of January.
Have a wonderful holiday, everyone.
Yes,
Thank you, Lance.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you, Lance. I just posted the simple way to save the transcript.
Okay, great.
Ah,
Oh, okay. So people are able to save it then?
Yeah, you just open up you just want to view the transcript the way you could the chat.
Okay.
The instructions are real simple. Tom clued me into it.
All right. Thank you all very much. Have a great holiday. Safe. Stay
Thank you,
away.
Lance.
Stay away
Oh.
from people. Wear your masks.
We won't meet for 3 weeks, I believe.
That's right. That's right. So that doesn't stop you from practicing.
Darn.